Hey everyone, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have a great conversation. Should be good. Just another one of our late night streams. All the best, and it should be fun. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always fun what we do here. We're going to have a chat like we always do. So yeah, I guess let's go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action. Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. It's going to be a great show tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. If you want to tweet this out, that would be awesome. Bring more folks. Drop this in a Facebook group or a Facebook chat group or a Twitter group or an email or a Post-it note or a whatever. Bring folks, bring all your friends. Let's have a great discussion. It's going to be a fun night tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Yes, for those of you who may not be aware, the way we do things here is that I give my opening remarks, and then my opening remarks are followed by a roll call where we call people out as we see them, names and locations. And then from there, I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. That's how our show works. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our show, why, it would be really awesome if you just went ahead and sent me a super chat. And so I'll write it down as I'm giving my opening remarks. I will write it down. And then in the second half of our show, I will then go ahead and do my best to give you an answer. It may not be the answer that you're looking for, but it will be an answer. And I think tonight I've got a super chat that somebody sent, that got missed another time. So we got that. I'm going to start out with the super chat that I missed. I'll even write that down on the list of super chats. Old super chat that was missed, and we'll do that super chat, and then I'll just do the new ones. We'll just do the new ones, and that's how we do things here. So, it's kind of a neat community we've got going on here. It really, really is. We talk, we got our running jokes, we've got our conversations, we got our little niche interests on this show. It's really neat what we do here. It's really something special. You tune into this. We're on here as much as we possibly can. And this community, we've got the Center for Political Innovation. We have in real life events. We have music. We have all kinds of stuff. And I mean, we got a usual crowd of people. I see Lori. I see Noah. I see Adam in the chat. We got a chat with a great group of mods who hold everything together and a great group of people. And yeah, this is good stuff. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. A couple quick announcements. We always want to get our business announcements out of the way. The most important business announcement of all is that we are having the Summit Against Hypocrisy. The Summit Against Hypocrisy is coming up. That's a great event. Here, I will put it on the screen. Hold on. I will put the logo up here on the screen, and we can just talk about it briefly. This is the link to register for the event. but it's going to be a very important event. The Summit Against Hypocrisy. We're doing it on March 25th and 26th in Washington, D.C. And this is our prebuttal to Joe Biden's State of the not his State of the Union, but his democracy summit, if you will. Every year of his presidency, Joe Biden has put on one of these democracy summits. And these democracy summits tend to be a big forum for Joe Biden to just attack Russia, attack China, attack Venezuela, attack Iran, and play up the idea that the United States is the leader of the free world. And so this year, the weekend before March 25th and 26th, we're having a bit of a gathering in Washington, D.C. All right. Wrote it down. Having a gathering in Washington, D.C., and there's going to be some great speakers there. It's going to be awesome. Garland Nixon, Scott Ritter, Nick Brana of the People's Party. There's going to be great music. There's going to be great speeches. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great little 2-day anti-imperialist rally and gathering that we're having in Washington, D.C. So we'd really like for you all to join us and be part of it. We're going to have a lot of different members of the Center for Political Innovation who talk about different countries, talk about the hypocrisy. We're going to have an organizer of workers in New York talk about the exploitation and the mistreatment of workers in New York City. We're going to have folks who talk about the conditions, faced by different peoples across the United States. Ryan Cotton, the mysterious man with the flag, is going to talk about the financial system, and it's going to be quite a gathering. Let me just put it that way. And the whole group, we're going to get to know each other pretty well. A lot of great speeches, a lot of great music, and just in case this is a bit of a motivator for some people, I might as well add this part. I was going to talk about this as an announcement as well, but we might as well also mention this. Everyone who attends the upcoming conference, the Summit Against Hypocrisy, will get their own free copy of this book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. And that is my new book. It is now available. You can get your own copy on Amazon.com. I will drop the link in the chat here. But you will get your own print copy for free if you come to the conference. It'll come with attending the conference. So everyone who comes will get their own copy of this book. So why don't I just let you know this book? This is my new book, Where is America Going? And it is not a book of articles. Many people have speculated that this is simply is Caleb just putting out another book of his articles? Nope, this is all new, except for the end. I did reprint my introduction to the Engels book, the essay about 3 socialist movements. I did include that, but other than that, it's all new. It is 415 pages of new content, and lots of research, huge bibliography. This is the culmination of years of research. This is all the concepts we talk about on these streams that we talk about: Bonapartism, divisions in the ruling class, the tendency of the rate of profits to fall, the problem of overproduction, the computer revolution and how it's leading to a prolonged economic crisis. It's all in this book, and I've done a lot of research. I have a timeline of events from 1978 to 1981 showing how there was a fight within the ruling class. We got that going on. We've got, all kinds of research and, about the fall of the Roman Empire. And I connect it all together to explain why events like January 6th happened and what's going on and how the United States is headed for what I call the inevitable triumph of illiberalism. It's all new content for the most part, except for the closing. There's one appendix in there that's a reprint. The rest of it's new. This is my new book. This is my manifesto, and You know, it's funny. This is not exactly a MAGA communism book. I wouldn't call it that. There's not that much about Donald Trump in there, but this is about as close to a MAGA communist manifesto as anything that's ever been published. Now, maybe next week, Haas or Hinkle or one of them will come out with a whole new book and completely outdo me. But if you're thinking in a MAGA communism kind of way, this is the book for you. Not exactly a MAGA communism book. I don't completely endorse that brand exactly, but the strand of thinking that understands that the kind of people that want a whole new country, that want to build the country up, that are wanting to stop the wars, that are against the globalist elite, that are trying to grind the world into poverty to preserve their own profits. If you're looking for that kind of a message, this is the book for you. And put a lot of work into it. I've had this book in my head for a long time, but really in August, I got to writing and I spent a long time working it out. And now it's out there, and it's not a short book either. Like I said, 415 pages, 415 pages. And people are reading it. People are giving me feedback already. So yeah, if you come to the conference that we're doing in Washington, D.C., March 25th and 26th, you will get your own copy of the book. So that's pretty awesome. I think I'm really happy that this book is out. I am waiting. My print edition has not arrived. I haven't actually held the book in my hand yet. But we will be giving everyone who attends our conference in March, they will get their own copy. So sign up to attend the conference. Or if you just want to order a copy of the book, I'll drop the Amazon link in here once again. You can just order it from Amazon. You can do that as well. You can just order a copy today if you want. I'll just drop the link here in the chat for Amazon. So there you go. Either way, this is where things are headed. Wanted to share all of that with you all. Another thing that might be worth mentioning, today I, for the first time ever, went on Kim Iverson's show. I appeared on Kim Iverson's show on Rumble. Kim Iverson is an anti-imperialist host. She's a conservative. She's a Vietnamese American. And she's a radio host. She's been doing radio, and she spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Today, I went on her show as a China expert. Now, we had a very wide-ranging conversation about China. I can't wait to post the clip on this YouTube channel. It was pretty good. It was a great chat. And Kim, she's not where I'm at. She's much more critical of China than I am. However, I got her to agree to many of the points I made. I talked about how basically, one of the things I said when I talked with Kim Iverson is I said what Donald Trump is promising to do with his quantum leap and these 15 freedom cities, what Joe Biden was emphasizing in his opening remarks at the State of the Union when he was talking about construction, that's what China is actually doing. What Americans want is what China is actually doing. That was a point that I made on the show, and it hit home, And Kim, she talked about how her family in Vietnam, how she's against communism because she feels like they don't have the freedom. But then Kim admitted that her family says that since the communists have been in power in Vietnam, everything has gotten better in the country. Their life has gotten so much better. And so Kim even admitted that what the communists in Vietnam have done in terms of raising living standards has been good, despite her strong disagreements with communism, as a Vietnamese American. I thought that was pretty cool. And the other thing that I thought was pretty neat was at one point I actually got in about how important it was that Donald Trump went to North Korea. And I got that point in there. And I talked about the provocative drills that are going on the Korean Peninsula. So it was a badass exchange. It was awesome. I cannot wait to post the link to my conversation with Kim Iverson on this YouTube channel. I have wanted to go on Kim's show for a long time because she's interesting, and she's, again, not where I'm at. She was saying stuff about China and COVID I didn't agree with. But there's a lot of people in her audience, I think, that really would be receptive to what we're about at the Center for Political Innovation and what this movement is really, really about, our anti-imperialism, our city-building tendency. I feel like a lot of people in her audience are receptive to that. We're not interested in pandering to the left socialist crowd any longer because that whole scene is completely completely bought and paid for, cash and carry. But Kim Iverson, I think there's a lot of good people that watch her show. So I feel like I spoke to a lot of them, and I feel like she enjoyed the back and forth. She shared about her experience, growing up with an Asian American mother and some of the differences in culture. It was just a great chat. So keep your eye out for it. I will get it up on this YouTube channel as soon as I possibly can. That's the other announcement. Another announcement. Wow, just a lot of announcements. We've been going for 15 minutes. I haven't even gotten to my opening remarks yet. Another announcement I wanted to make, Patreon folks, I haven't forgotten you. If you're a Patreon supporter, I have not forgotten you. We will be doing a patrons only stream within the next week. I usually do them right at the beginning of the month, but with everything going on and the prep for the big conference, etc., I didn't have an opportunity just yet. So yes, you haven't been forgotten if you're a Patreon supporter. And if you want to get in on it, never too late to get in on the action. If you want to be part of our special, intimate, patrons-only streams, by all means, sign up on the Patreon. There you go. There you go. There you go. So those are my opening remarks for tonight. Right now, we're streaming on the Rockfin. How many people are watching on Rockfin right now? There's 3 people watching on Rockfin. There's over 100 people that are watching this on the YouTube. There's a number of people watching this on Facebook. We're on Facebook. We're on Rockfin. We're on YouTube. And on top of that, afterwards, this will be uploaded to Rumble. After this will be uploaded to Odyssey. We are everywhere that videos can go. We are. And we are a great growing community. One more announcement. Here I go. I'm just hitting you all with lots of announcements, but that's okay. One last announcement is that we have another YouTube channel. I don't know if you know about this, but I do streams on here all the time. I try to stream as much as I possibly can. And so because of that, I can't post. People would like if I posted like clips, and selected videos, if they could find things more easily. So I've been posting my different chats on this other channel I made called Caleb Maupin Videos. And I post most of the opening remarks, most of the longer talks I do, or some of the special answers. I post them. So go and subscribe to this other YouTube channel I started, right? This is called Caleb Maupin Videos. And I posted my full debate with the libertarians. I posted it on there. I posted, I've got some old video of Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party. I've got, Kamala Harris's satanic find out why. The latest video is setbacks and advances, learning from the life of William Z. Foster. I've got leftist myths about fascism. It is the other YouTube channel. It's our partner YouTube channel. I set up this YouTube channel as another place that we can post clips about what we're about, because we're just pushing things, in a lot of different directions. For all the Vietnam success, why are they plagued with sex trafficking? Why are they plagued with sex trafficking? Interesting question. I just want everyone to go and subscribe to that channel when you can see, because on here I just have streams with numbers. I try to put themes afterwards after we're done having our chat. But it's much easier. I want to preserve some of the conversations we have here. So you can go and subscribe to the Caleb Maupin Videos channel, the accomplishments of Hugo Chavez. So we got that going on. So those seem to be my opening remarks. No, those are not my opening remarks. Those are my announcements. And now I'm going to get to my opening remarks. Wow. What a night. What a night it has been. I'm going to get to my opening remarks. So there you go. I'm writing the super chats down. We'll do the roll call after the opening remarks are over. And then from there, I'll answer super chat questions. That's how we do it. So keep the super chats coming in. I've always got plenty to say about those super chats. Wow. So today was a busy day for me. Today I did my work. I did my work for RT, did my reporting. And then from there, I briefly went and had some lunch, sat in a restaurant and kind of prepped for the interview. Then I did my interview with Kim Iverson. Then I went to the movies with my wife. And now I am home, and the process will begin once again tomorrow. And I've been doing different readings and having conversations with different people. There's a few things that have come up on my mind. One of them is that humor can be an important thing. I am not a comedian. I like to consider myself as having a good sense of humor, but I'm a bit of a serious person. I take things seriously. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think our opponents, our political opponents, if you look at these bread tubers, they look like they're high half the time. They can't take anything seriously. Everything is a cynical joke to them. Well, we're very serious about what we do on this channel. We're very serious about what we believe in, but there's a room for humor. A little while back, I went on the Fakertarians podcast. Do folks remember that? I went on the Fakertarians, some kind of libertarian podcast. I went on that, and they just wanted to sit there, and those guys were stoned and high, and they just wanted to sit there and tell jokes, and it worked. I told a few jokes that I knew, and it actually oddly worked. It worked, and so it worked, and there's something to be said for being relaxed. There's something to be said for being laid back. And that's something that part of me has always struggled with. I've always been a go, go, go kind of person. I want to get things done. I'm writing the book. I'm putting on the conference. I'm organizing the group. I'm helping do this. I'm helping do that. I'm planning this, There's something to be said for being laid back. There's something to be said for that. And that, as somebody who is very, very focused, sometimes it is good to just hang loose a little bit, to be a little more laid back. That can be a good thing. But I would say that overall, our culture leans way too far in the opposite direction. I see so much of people not acting like adults, people that are in their 20s, people that are in their 30s that aren't acting like adults. It bothers me. And it bothers me because if people can't act like adults, people can't take life seriously, they're not going to be able to accomplish much. If you don't take yourself seriously, why should anyone else take you seriously? I see a lot of people who don't take themselves seriously. It saddens me a little bit. It worries me. But often people who don't take themselves seriously, often people that are cynical, it's a way to protect themselves. They're trying to protect themselves from something. They're trying to avoid responsibility. I see a lot of that. Because with responsibility comes accountability. If you're responsible for something and it goes wrong, then you are accountable for it. And that's something people are afraid of. The stakes get higher when you take responsibility. When you act like an adult, ultimately that means you're taking responsibility. And if you're taking responsibility, that means you're subject to accountability. Things go wrong, it's your fault. And so when I see people that go through life cynically, and go through life acting like children, and go through life where everything's a joke, going through life making fun of everyone who takes themselves seriously, I see so much of the kind of hipster humor that I see it's people just simply saying, oh my God, someone actually believes in something. What's wrong with them? They must be stupid. Oh, they actually believe in something. That's so stupid. What a loser. What a sucker. That's the tone I hear in a lot of the cynical material that I come across. It's It's not a political criticism. It's not a criticism of what the person believes. It's not really a criticism even of how the person is conducting themselves. It's a criticism of a mindset. How dare you believe in something? How dare you seek to accomplish something? How dare you invest in something? That's the attitude. And it's tragic. It's tragic, and wherever you see it, it's very much an expression of that person trying to protect themselves from inadequacies, self-disappointments that they are very, very, very aware of. It's quite interesting stuff. And I observe that a lot nowadays. It's interesting, when we talk about generals fighting the last war, I had never heard that expression, generals fighting the last war. Years ago, I heard that expression. Apparently, it's a very common saying, generals fighting the last war. Because it's true. That when there's a war, the generals then spend the peacetime thinking what they did wrong in that war. And when a new war starts, the generals go into that war to not make the mistakes that they made in the last war, to get everything right that they got wrong before. However, the battlefield has changed. It's a new war. It's different. And so this expression there, they talk about generals fighting the last war. This refers to people that are stuck in the past, trying to correct the mistakes that they made in the past. They're trying to correct mistakes they made in the past, and that hinders their ability to operate in the present day effectively because they are stuck trying to correct the mistakes they made in the past. This is when people refer to generals fighting the last war. That is what they are referring to. And that's interesting to me because I think about my own political journey. And I think about how I've gradually come to understand politics. And my understanding has gotten so complex over the years. And there are so many things that I understand now in a much more elaborate, complicated way. Plato, in Plato's Republic, he has that parable of the cave, where he talks about someone who's like chained in a cave and they see like, shadows on the wall and they think that those shadows are reality. There's many, many layers of complexity to political discourse. And as you're coming through life trying to make sense of all these things, a lot of the mistakes that I see when I look back through my own political life, and then I look at people now that are coming up and trying to be effective politically, a lot of the mistakes are rooted in just not having the full picture. But how much do any of us have the full picture, right? We just have what we see now. We don't have the full picture. The picture always gets bigger. And if you're a person who's trying to keep learning through life, the picture should always be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It should always be that your perception gets less and less narrow. You start to understand things on a deeper level, and then on an even deeper level, and on a deeper and deeper level. The complexities of the world, you digest more and more and more. I've mentioned before that when I was a teenager, I loved the musical Hair. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, right? But I was a teenager. You know, my family wasn't deeply political. Well, I mean, we talked politics a lot in my household. My family were not leftists or Marxists by any means. They were, they were small town moderate liberals in a very, very conservative area. My mother's deeply religious. And, my dad's pretty conservative in his own ways. And they were, small town liberals. And I remember I got really interested in the musical Hair when I was a teenager because of the fact that I saw it. There was a CD of it at the public library. There was a CD of the musical Hair at the public library. CDs, that was before MP3s and, music or whatever. And it was when you had to have a physical thing. Cassette tapes were out, CDs, compact discs were in, and there was a compact disc of the musical Hair at the public library. And at the time, I had already kind of gotten interested in communism. I'd tried to read the Communist Manifesto. I'd called myself maybe a democratic socialist, or I thought socialism, the idea of kind of a planned economy, was kind of a good thing. And so at the public library, they had this album. It said Hair, the original soundtrack of the American tribal love rock musical. Remember, I got the CD of Hair, took it to my CD player, and I listened to that musical. And it was wild. It was wild. It was like I had never heard, it was like something from another planet, right? I lived in a small town among very conservative folks, religious folks. I put on that musical Hair. Age of Aquarius, Good Morning Starshine. Wow. I at the age of, I think I was 12, maybe 13, maybe 11. And what I heard coming out of my CD player, it was flabbergasting to me. First of all, I had never heard anyone say anything positive about drugs. Ever. Ever. I mean, all I had ever heard about drugs was don't do them. I had sat through all the DARE lectures about, don't do drugs, don't do drugs. I didn't even understand that drugs were pleasurable to take. I just thought it was just this bad thing one must stay away from. And I remember there's a number of songs in the musical Hair, Walking in Space, promoting drug use. And I was just like, wow. I also did not understand and did not know anything about the Vietnam War protest movement. All I knew about the Vietnam War protest movement was that I knew that near where I had grown up, there had been a massacre. I knew that at Kent State University, which was a university in the area, I knew that a long time ago, like when my parents were young, there had been a protest or something and some people had been killed. And I knew, and I heard people constantly saying, oh, all these people who protested at Kent State, they were all traitors. They deserved to be killed. And so I was listening to this album, this old album Hair, that's promoting the Vietnam War protest movement. It's promoting drug use. It's talking about hippies. I kind of vaguely understood what a hippie was. Somebody with long hair. It was like a trendy thing to be, like when my parents were kids. I remember just listening to this album. All of that was completely foreign to me. All of that. And the time that I heard that, that seemed way more exciting than anything I was growing up around. I was growing up around deeply conservative evangelical folks, most of whom, my town was divided. A lot of them were conservative Mennonites, and some of the folks were into the evangelical megachurch stuff. And that stuff all seemed way, way more exciting than what they had in my little town. And I was exploring these forbidden concepts about communism and all of that. And when I listened to Hare, I thought, this is amazing. This is utterly amazing. It's taken me years to really come to understand. I don't even really want to put it that way. I reflect on that now in this moment, and I realize the political naivete I had and thinking, this is so exciting, because compared to the political understanding I was getting around me, where that stuff sounded very, very profound to me. It was like, whoa, a new world of peace and love and brotherhood, and drugs are not bad, and the government, the man is the enemy. And I was hearing, and it's compared to what I was listening to, compared to what I was being spoon-fed in school and in church and in my neighborhood and in my community, all that stuff sounded really, really radical and exciting. And it sounded like a rebellion against everything I was surrounded by. So it appealed to me because it was all new to me. And all I had to compare it to was a world I was not very happy with, and a world that was somehow unsatisfactory. So I think about that. And it took me a while to really get to the point where I realized that the 1960s countercultural revolution was a negative thing. And now I talk about that a lot. I talk about the synthetic left. I talk about the Congress for Cultural Freedom. I talk about all of that now. And it's like, have I gone for full circle? No, I haven't gone for full circle. I glimpsed a little bit of the picture in that moment in my early teen years. And my understanding has been expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding to the point that I can now see that little picture that I had, that little picture that I had, that glimpse that I had of counterculture, dissent, protests, radicals, hippies, I know so much more now. But actually, I think about the musical Hair now, and it kind of disgusts me. However, I had to go through that to get where I am today. If I just stayed in the mindset of my small town, I never would have gotten where I am today. And it was almost like I had to, it was like a phase I had to go through. It was like something I had to investigate. It was part of the journey. When you think about how you come to understand the world, how you come to understand things like politics and religion and world history, we talk about big concepts on here like dialectical and historical materialism. The road to understanding is often complex. And you have to, Hair, the musical Hair, and my discovering at a young age that 1960s counterculture existed, the Vietnam War protest movement existed, and then being enamored with it because it seemed like such a strong alternative to all the conservatism I was surrounded with, that was necessary. That was a milestone on my path to bigger understanding. And I think about that a lot, because a lot of times one's political journey can be like that. I remember during the financial crisis, 2008, that's when I got really, really fascinated with the history of the Communist Party. I devoured every book I could find on William Z. Foster, Gus Hall, the unemployment councils, the sit-down strike wave. The communist group I was in was encouraging that, and the U.S. economy had crashed. And that's when I remember really coming to the conclusion that the new left was not good. And, I didn't think it was a CIA conspiracy or anything like that. I just thought it wasn't good. And I remember thinking, what we need now is a mass workers movement like they had in the 1930s. We need unemployment councils. We need strong labor unions that occupy their factories and fight for the rights of workers. We need Jimmy Hoffa. We need strong Teamster leaders. We need a mass working class movement. And I looked at the left, the protests I would go to, and I saw a lot of hippies, a lot of really old, burned out hippies. And that was when it took me all those years that was like the first inclination I got that the hippie thing wasn't good. The hippie thing wasn't good. I also remember reading the writings of Nelson Peary. Nelson Peary's writings, I was never involved with his political organizations, but I have always loved the work of Nelson Peary. My new book, I cite Nelson Peary. Nelson Peary, he wrote, "The Future is Up to Us." This is a great book. I remember reading this. That's a really important book to read. He wrote, this is his 2-volume autobiography that he wrote, Black Fire, The Making of an American Revolutionary. He wrote another book, the follow-up book, Black Radical, The Education of an American Revolutionary. Those 2 books, in which Nelson Peary reflects on his life and his political development, how he went from being, an African-American man from Minnesota and joining the U.S. military and eventually joining the Communist Party. And some of the other writings of Nelson Peary I was able to get my hands on. And that was very helpful in understanding. And I remember, as I read Nelson Peary, and I looked at the financial meltdown, the financial crisis of 2008. I looked at the Tea Party. We were supposed to hate the Tea Party. They were no good. And I looked at the left, eventually what culminated in Occupy Wall Street, and that was supposed to be good. And I started to think that there were divisions in the ruling class. I started to think there were divisions in the ruling class. And I remember reading how Nelson Peary described how the civil rights movement was a division within the ruling class. How coming out of the Second World War, with the Soviet Union exposing the U.S. government for racism around the world, and telling the world that the USA was a hypocritical country, saying that the USA, they say they believe in freedom and democracy, but they hang black men from trees and they mutilate their bodies. They have separate lunch counters and separate drinking fountains for black people. They don't even allow black people to vote. With the Soviet Union taking the image of Emmett Till's mutilated body and sending it all over the world and saying, this is what America does to black people. But there started to be divisions within the ruling class about how to relate to the issue of race. And furthermore, I remember also hearing about how after the Second World War, the Truman administration had wanted to create a national health insurance system. We got very close to having national health care back in the 1940s, 1948. Did you know this? The Truman administration, the post-Roosevelt administration, in all the countries that were being rebuilt after World War II. In Britain and France and West Germany, the government was creating a national health service, providing people with health care. Harry Truman thought they ought to do that for the United States as well. And I remember reading articles from the New York Times during the Obamacare debate showing how racism had been the main barrier to preventing the creation of a national health care service. The Democrats were ready to set up a national health care service, and racism was the issue. The South said the only way we can have a national health care service is you got to have a black hospital and a white hospital. The only way we're going to have a national health care service is if we have separate facilities. The Northern government, they weren't going to agree to that. And it was actually race and racism that killed national health insurance, the health insurance bill of the Truman administration. There's New York Times articles about this. It was the South, the Dixiecrats, when it couldn't be guaranteed to them. When it couldn't be guaranteed to the Dixiecrats, the segregationists, that they would get separate hospitals. The government would build two hospitals, a black one and a white one. And they wouldn't be able to have whites only signs at their hospitals. They got rid of it. They wouldn't vote for it. And national health insurance died. Remember, that was an important thing. And I remember reading Nelson Peary explaining that it was a division in the ruling class that created the civil rights movement. The communists had been protesting for equality for a long time. They'd been marching for the Scottsboro Nine. They built the Civil Rights Congress. They called for equal rights for African Americans. But the ruling class started to move on the issue of race. The Montgomery bus boycott, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that came from the ruling class. The ruling class was very afraid that the black people of the United States would become communists because the Soviet Union was their friend and the U.S. society clearly wasn't. The ruling class of the United States was very afraid of losing control. And they were also very, very unhappy with the amount of power that the segregationists of the South had. On top of that, they weren't happy with the Soviet Union humiliating them around the world. And so the Kennedy family and a lot of Northern Democratic Party liberals started talking about civil rights in the mid-50s because there was a division in the ruling class. This is all very important to understand. It was a division within the ruling class that gave birth to the modern civil rights movement. The Communist Party and black people themselves had been fighting and resisting. But it wasn't until a section of the ruling class said, okay, we're going to do something about this. That's when the modern civil rights movement really began. And the modern civil rights movement got going 1954, 1955. It continued. The protests, the sit-ins, the civil disobedience. But they lost control of it. They lost control of it. It's very clear the ruling class lost control of it. And many people point out that the reason Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was constantly espousing nonviolence, I don't know what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. personally believed. I assume that he was completely sincere in everything that he said, but part of the main reason that he constantly was saying he was a pacifist, that he did not believe in violence, was because there was a huge amount of fear of some kind of black revolt. And that many white Americans feared there would be mass vengeance killings. And that was what motivated many white Americans to oppose the civil rights movement. As they said, they knew in their bones all the evil things that had been done to black people. And they were very afraid that if the black people started organizing, the next thing you know, they were going to kill all the white people. And so with Dr. Martin Luther King at the top of his lungs saying, we don't believe in violence, we don't believe in vengeance, turn the other cheek. That was really, really necessary to prevent the civil rights movement from just being completely smashed from the beginning. That if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been saying anything but that, the white power structure and the ruling class would have been united in crushing it. It was necessary because there was a real fear of payback, on the part of the black community. The black community was going to take vengeance for the years of lynching and segregation and torture and economic oppression. And that's very interesting as well. There was a lot of civil rights leaders who got murdered. Medgar Evers, church bombings. But then we understand that in Monroe, North Carolina, there was a chapter of the NAACP led by Robert F. Williams. And Robert F. Williams was protesting against the segregation of the swimming pool. The city swimming pool that all the residents paid for with their tax dollars was being denied access to black people. And they said, well, this isn't fair. We pay taxes just like everyone else. We pay for this swimming pool, but because we're black, we're not allowed to swim in it. So they started protesting at the swimming pool, having a protest. The Ku Klux Klan was particularly upset about the idea of blacks and whites swimming together. And this is interesting. There's a context to this that I did not know, but apparently even today, a lot of very conservative Southern Baptists don't believe in what they call mixed swimming. They don't believe in different genders swimming together. You go to a really conservative fundamental Baptist high school, they'll have if there's a pool there, they'll have a day for the boys in the pool, and then they'll have another day for the girls in the pool. That even up to today, a lot of very conservative religious folks do not believe that men and women should be swimming in the same swimming pool. It's interesting. That women in bathing suits is a sexually arousing thing to men. And that a lot of very and Muslims too, right? In the Muslim world, men and women do not swim in the same swimming pools because the way women are clad when they are swimming is very sexually arousing to a man. It's interesting. So the idea of black men and white men and black women and white women swimming in the same swimming pool was something the Ku Klux Klan was just horrified by. The idea of interracial marriage, interracial dating. So the idea that these people of different races would be together in the same swimming pool just drove the Klan up the wall. And so they shot at them. They were having their protest outside the swimming pool, demanding that the Civil Rights Act be enforced. And the Klan drove up and shot at them. They were being shot at. Their rallies would be broken up by gunfire. So what did Robert F. Williams do? Robert F. Williams, you can read his Wikipedia page, very famous individual. He and his fellow members of the NAACP of Monroe, North Carolina, they decided that they ought to join the National Rifle Association. They joined the NRA. They became legal Second Amendment practitioners. They became legal gun owners. And at their next protest at the swimming pool in Monroe, North Carolina, they were packing heat. They brought their own guns, and they did gun training courses, and they trained all these black ministers in how to use firearms. So the next protest they had at the swimming pool, they were there with their rifles. And the Klan showed up and shot back at them, and they shot back. And the Klan ran away, and they had their protest. Eventually, the Klan, I believe that they went to Robert F. Williams' house, if I'm not mistaken. There was a shootout. A couple Klansmen got killed. So Robert F. Williams had to flee the country because he was, tried for murder because he got into a shootout with the Ku Klux Klan. So where did he go? Where did Robert F. Williams go? I'm going to pull up the picture. Right? That's the great thing about StreamYard is I can show you all pictures, right? I will show you where Robert F. Williams went. It's a wild story. This is where Robert F. Williams went. I hope it's big enough on the screen. I hope it's big enough on the screen. I can probably find a bigger version of this picture, but we'll try this one. But this is where Robert F. Williams went. Yeah, that's not a very good version of that picture. But that's Robert F. Williams with Mao. I'm going to try to find a better version of that picture. Hold on. That's way too small. Yeah, here we go. Much better version of the picture. All right. All righty. But this is really important history. This is very, 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 very important history. That's Robert F. Williams of Monroe, North Carolina, with Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. He's signing his little red book for him. When Robert F. Williams had to flee the United States, Mao, the leader of Communist China, invited him to China. And at his request, Mao wrote a statement supporting the civil rights movement in America. Here, I'll link it in the chat. Mao wrote a statement. This is Mao Zedong. Statement supporting the American Negroes in their just struggle against racial discrimination by U.S. imperialism. This is an official statement from Mao Zedong supporting the black people of America in their struggle against the American government. This is an official statement. Robert F. Williams was not preaching turn the other cheek. Robert F. Williams was preaching the right of armed self-defense. That's what Robert F. Williams was preaching. And Martin Luther King Jr. may have opened the door, but Robert F. Williams was able to walk through it. And Robert F. Williams didn't just go to China. He went to Cuba. And Robert F. Williams eventually started something called Radio Free Dixie. You know why they hate foreign media so much? They're constantly trying to inoculate you and tell you not to listen to Russian media or Chinese media or press TV from Iran. Do you know why? Because they remember Radio Free Dixie. Go and read about Radio Free Dixie. This was a program broadcasted from Cuba by Robert F. Williams. And from Cuba, he was urging the black people of America to rise up against American capitalism. You can read the Wikipedia page about Radio Free Dixie. And that, yes, the civil rights movement may have started as a division within the ruling class, but after a while, they lost control of it. And it gave rise to a much bigger movement called the Black Liberation Movement. For the people who listened to Radio Free Dixie, there were fans of Radio Free Dixie that listened to Robert F. Williams' broadcasts from Cuba calling for a communist revolution, quoting Mao, etc. The people who listened to those radio broadcasts, they organized a group called the Revolutionary Action Movement, the RAM. And it was mainly people that were part of a civil rights group that had worked with Dr. Martin Luther King called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They started a secret organization called Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM. RAM was people who listened to Radio Free Dixie and people who worked in the civil rights movement who wanted to form a new black liberation-oriented communist party. It was a secret organization. It was not public. It was underground. Malcolm X met with them. They were a revolutionary organization. RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement. They were the beginning of what you might call the new communist movement. They wanted to form a new communist party that was aligned with China. They thought CPUSA was too reformist, too revisionist. They had the Revolutionary Action Movement. And it was two members of the Revolutionary Action Movement, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who eventually started the Black Panthers. They felt that they didn't like the Revolutionary Action Movement. It wasn't exciting enough. So they had the idea to do the Black Panthers. So the Black Panthers came out of the Revolutionary Action Movement. We all know about the Black Panthers and their history. So it's interesting to see how these things develop over the course of time. Started out as a division within the ruling class. They lost control of it. And even in the final years of his life, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was condemning capitalism. Bet you didn't know that. In his final years of his life, Martin Luther King Jr. said that capitalism was no good. And actually, I have here, that's one of the good things about our Jesus is a Socialist book. We didn't just include quotes from the Bible. We did. But we also included quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to read to you what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said about capitalism. These are quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on socialism. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth within this country for all of God's children. That's speech to the Negro American Labor Council, 1961. The evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and the evils of racism. That's speech to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference Board, March 30th, 1967. I imagine you already know that I am much more socialistic in my economic theory than capitalistic. Like most human systems, it fell victim to the very thing it was revolting against. So today, capitalism has outlived its usefulness. Letter to Coretta Scott King, July 18th, 1952. And one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising questions about the economic system, about the broader distribution of wealth. And when you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. That's speech to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Atlanta, Georgia, August 16th, 1967. We are saying that something is wrong with capitalism. There must be better distribution of wealth in America, and maybe America must move toward a democratic socialism. 1966, speech to his staff. You can't talk about solving the economic problem of the Negro without talking about billions of dollars. You can't talk about ending the slums without first saying profit must be taken out of the slums. You're really tampering and getting on dangerous ground when you are messing with folks then. You are messing with the captains of industry. Now this means we are treading in difficult water because it really means that we are saying that something is wrong with capitalism. Speech to his staff, 1966. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles will not solve their problems. And I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes about most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without first having spoken clearly against the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys and for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent. That's Dr. Martin Luther King, April 4th, 1967. We must recognize that we can't solve our problem until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power. This means a revolution of values and other things. This means we must see that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are tied together. You can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other. The whole structure of American life must be changed. America is a hypocritical nation, and we must put our own house in order. 1967. Somehow this madness must cease. We must stop now. I speak as a child of God and the brother of the suffering poor of Vietnam. I speak for those whose land is being laid waste, whose homes are being destroyed, and whose culture is being subverted. I speak for the poor of America, who are paying the double price of smash hopes at home and death and corruption in Vietnam. I speak as a citizen of the world as it stands aghast at the path we have taken. I speak as one who loves America, and to the leaders of our own nation. The great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must also be ours. April 4th, 1967. He says, I am now convinced that the simplest approach will prove the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed matter of a guaranteed income. The curse of poverty has no justification in our age. It is socially as cruel and blind as the practice of cannibalism at the dawn of civilization, when men ate each other because they had not yet learned to take food from the soil or to consume the abundant animal life around them. The time has come for us to civilize ourselves by the total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty. That's from his book, Where Do We Go From Here, 1967. If America does not use her vast resources of wealth to end poverty and make it possible for all God's children to have the basic necessities of life, she too will go to hell. Speech at the Bishop Charles Mason Temple, Church of God in Christ, March 18th, 1968. I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear the economic plight of the Negro poor and has worsened over the last few years. That's from his 60-minute interview, 1966. These are revolutionary times. All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems of exploitation and oppression. And out of the wounds of a frail world, a new system of justice and equality is being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the land are rising up as never before. The people who sat in darkness have seen great light. And we in the West must support these revolutions. April 4th, 1967. Yeah, I could keep going, but that's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those are his words, you know? There's a reason he was shot down and murdered in 1968. And you think about all of these things. Sometimes I get on here planning to make a great big speech, and other times I just want to come on here and speak from the heart and kind of reflect. I reflect about how I was listening to the musical Hair when I was a teenager and trying to make sense of what had gone on. And I think about all the time I've spent in socialist and communist circles, trying to promote anti-imperialism, trying to build a movement that works. I think about what happened, the different phases the Black liberation movement went through. I think about all the lies that were told. I think of how we're constantly trying to get a bigger picture, just a bigger picture, a bigger understanding. I think about all of that. It's important to reflect, to figure out where you came from and where you're going. That's what I'm on here talking about tonight. A lot of important things are in the works. This conference that we're doing is going to be really, really awesome. And the Center for Political Innovation is marching ahead. We're open to new ideas. We're innovating. We're questioning old narratives. I'm excited about the prospect of peace on the Korean Peninsula. I'm excited about the prospect of peace with Russia and China. I'm excited about the prospect of going out and organizing and building an anti-imperialist coalition in the United States to revive the city-building tendency. We're doing something really special with CPI. I'll just say this. And if we were just doing the old thing, right? We were just doing the same old thing that communists have been doing in the United States, it wouldn't be special. You know, I was telling people today, I remember years ago, I was out selling a newspaper. It was the newspaper of the Revolutionary Communist Party. I was selling their newspaper when I was 19 years old. I went to go sell them a newspaper, and they said, "Are you from the Communist? Is this newspaper from the Communist Party?" I said, "No, the paper is from the Revolutionary Communist Party." And he said, He's like, "Well, maybe somebody should start the Super Revolutionary Communist Party or the Super Ultra Revolutionary Communist Party." And I mean, it's funny. It's actually a pretty good joke because it's like that's kind of what we got. You know, I mean, that's kind of where we're at with American communist groups. It's like, are you in the Communist Party? No, I'm in the Revolutionary Communist Party. Yeah, well, I'm in the Ultra Revolutionary Communist Party. Yeah, well, I'm in the Super Duper Ultra Revolutionary Communist Party. Yeah, well, I'm in the Super Internationalist Workers Revolutionary Combat Marxist Party. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And this is just silliness. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. It's a J-O-K-E joke. And if we just keep doing the same old stuff, and if we keep acting that way, we're going to be a joke as well. No, we're not a joke. Jokes don't send election observers to Nicaragua. Jokes don't have conferences that Newsweek feels a need to comment on. Jokes aren't able to reboot their organization as rapidly as we have. And we have done so much in such a short amount of time. But we're doing it because of our name. We are the Center for Political Innovation. That third word, innovation. Innovation. What does that mean? It means we're not stuck in a rut. We're innovating. Means we're innovating. You know, we have our educational manual. This is the hard copy version of it. We are city builders. If you read it, it's about so much more than socialism versus capitalism. It's about so much more than opposing Western imperialism. We are the city building tendency. If Julius Caesar was alive today, he'd be part of our movement. If Jesus Christ was currently on the earth, I think that he would be part of our movement. You know, we're part of something much, much bigger. Much, much bigger. Much, 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 much bigger than just a 20th century war between capitalism and communism. We're about so much more than that. And communism in the 20th century had its flaws. The Soviet Union fell. Communism adjusted. And the communism of today is not the communism of the 1930s or the 1950s or even the 1970s and 80s. The communist world has innovated. And communists around the world have got to innovate as well. Communists in the United States have got to innovate. And we're doing something so much bigger than just, we're not starting the super ultra revolutionary Communist Party. We don't think that we have the exact true interpretation of Mao and Enver Hoxha's teachings, that if only you apply it, everything will be fine. We're doing something different. And that's why we're relevant. And if you're not relevant, and you're not attached to really existing social forces, then you're lost. That's the point. That's why Marx endorsed Lincoln. That's why the Communist Party entered the Roosevelt coalition. If you're just sitting there, and you're not attached to anything real, you're not attached to real social forces, you're not going to accomplish anything. We need to do what the Communist Party set out to do back in 1948, which was to build an anti-monopoly coalition. Because we're finally in a period now where a real anti-monopoly coalition could be built. That was what the communists during the Cold War, that was the orientation they had. Their job was to build an anti-monopoly coalition, to unite all the forces that would be against the big monopolies in the war machine. An anti-monopoly coalition. That's what they set out to build. That's what we ought to build. We ought to build an anti-monopoly coalition. All the forces that are against Amazon, all the forces that are against Walmart, all the forces that are against the Pentagon, that don't want a new war, that want the economy of the United States to boom again, all the big monopolists that are trying to save the country with degrowth, trying to drive down living standards, trying to destroy countries around the world, trying to grind the American working people into poverty, got to be repudiated. And all of us who want growth and human progress and development, an end to these wars, a new global order based on win-win cooperation, we got to come together. We need to build an anti-monopoly coalition. That's what William Z. Foster talked about. That's what Gus Hall talked about. An anti-monopoly coalition. That's what we need to build. Yeah, it'll have some capitalists in it. And yeah, it'll have some small business owners in it. And yeah, it'll even have maybe some wealthy capitalist folks in it. But the point is, it'll be against the big monopolies. It'll be in favor of doing business with Russia and China. It'll be in favor of rebuilding the country's economy. And the working class will be the most important partner in that coalition. Because the working class is the overwhelming majority of the country. The proletariat, the working class, those of us who earn a paycheck, that's the overwhelming majority of the people in the country, the working class. So we'll be decisive. And it's only with our objective understanding of history and our mass movement, it's only with that we'll be able to offer the guidance and leadership. Just like the Chinese Communist Party built their bloc of 4 great classes, led by the Communist Party with their proletarian ideology. We, at the Center for Political Innovation, we will be at the center, I am convinced, of an anti-monopoly coalition. Stand against the big bankers and their wars, the big oil companies. That's what I'm convinced. That's the point of my new book. That's the point of my new book, is about building the anti-monopoly coalition. And I think about these things, and I take them seriously. The last thing I ever want to be is on autopilot. The last thing I ever want to be is just going through the motions, doing the same old thing. Oh boy, gotta keep doing it. That's the way we always did it. Oh boy, we're not having any results. We're getting smaller and weaker, but that's okay. Oh boy, that's the last thing I ever want to do. We need innovation. We need energy. We need to be constantly teaching ourselves new methods to be successful. We got to take this seriously, because the moment is arising when our role could be quite decisive. So on that note, folks, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and let's start doing the roll call. Those are my opening remarks. They are concluded. Names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. We got Valen in Anderson, Richmond, Virginia. Ryan in Kansas City. I met you, Ryan. I met you. Very good. I met you in D.C. Temple City, California. Carl in Washington. Temple City, California. We got Jenny in Cincinnati. We got 4411825 in Ohio. We got QC to Los Angeles County. We got Charles in Zambia. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Ryan in Oakland. Colin in Greensboro. Carolyn and Dario in Brooklyn. Shout out to you, Carolyn and Dario. Jake from NYC. Heidi in Edinburgh, Scotland. Balthazar in Oakland. We got Farmook in Seattle. We got Noah in Southeast Massachusetts. Noah's great, by the way. Plays the saxophone. We got Patch in Arizona. We got Alex from Brazil, Bob Troy in New York, Joe in LA County, Molly McGuire in Orange County, Randall Wilson in Lexington, Kentucky, Mission in Texas. We got Mark Foster in Mission, Texas. We got Tom G in Switzerland. We got Brad in Anacortes. Very good. We got San Diego County, Green Maoist. Very, very good. We got Bob from Palo Alto, California. We got Mark in Texas. Lori Spencer's out in Oklahoma. Lori's great. Maverick News. She's doing great stuff out there. Who else? I got John McCarthy packing for St. Louis. You're going to that important conference for the Uhuru movement, I believe, right? The Uhuru movement are under attack, and CPI is endorsing that conference, to stand with the Uhuru movement against FBI repression. Very, very good. Very, 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 very good. Yeah, that's great work John McCarthy is doing. The Uhuru movement is under attack. They're having an important conference in St. Louis. They're freezing their bank accounts now. Did you hear about this? It's unbelievable. John Binghamton. All right. So now, you're right, Noah. They are trying to freeze the bank accounts of the Uhuru movement. We got to stand up against this. They can do this to anybody. It's what they did in Canada to the truckers. You got to oppose this. You got to oppose it. Got to oppose it. You got to oppose it. You got to oppose it. You got to oppose it. So there's a super chat question I missed from another night. And I guess the person emailed me. They really want me to answer it. So the question they asked was, does your new book have a section on impact finance, the global debt bonding basis for stockholder data capitalism? It was laid out in the July and August 2016 issue of Foreign Affairs magazine. Well, the answer to that is no. I do not have a section on that topic. I talk about a lot of different things in the book, and I do talk about imperialism and capitalism in its monopoly stage, but I don't talk about that particular topic in the new book. I do talk about the financialization and Wall Street. Oh, here you are. You're watching, and I'm answering it. I don't talk about that in the new book, but that is certainly an important point. And I would like to actually read more about this. You mentioned it was an article in Foreign Affairs magazine from 2016, and I have not read that article. I was reading Foreign Affairs more regularly at that time when it was published, but I have not read that particular article. So there you go. I don't have a section on that in the new book, but I want to learn more about it. I would really like to learn more about it. And I think I'm going to research that and possibly talk about it on a future stream, because it sounds like a topic that I would like to learn more about. So there we go. Here for an unnamed diet beverage in the name of Hugo Chavez. All right. Thank you. And Chris in Salt Lake City, Maddie in California. All right. Next question we've got. Some say that Stalin, Mao, and Marx were Freemasons. What do you make of that? Well, the Freemasons don't allow communists. Marx was an atheist. Stalin was an atheist. Mao Zedong was an atheist, and they do not allow any atheists in Freemasonry. One of the principal beliefs of the Freemasons is belief in the supreme being. Now, a lot of their beliefs, as you get higher up in Masonry, my understanding is that they're kind of universalist. They believe that Islam and Christianity and Judaism are all like the path to the same God, and they don't believe in like the miracles of the Bible, etc. But they do, from my understanding, they do mandate. It is required. I think one of the first questions they ask you when you become a Freemason is, do you believe in God? And if you don't believe in God, you can't be a Freemason. The symbols of the Masonry, if you see the compass and the square with the G, right? The G on it. The G stands for geometry, and it stands for God. And they argue that God's existence is proven by the laws of the universe. That's what they argue, right? And that geometry and mathematics and God are like, that's what the G in their symbol stands for. Masonry was it's interesting. It's something I realized I didn't know very much about. And so I started reading about it. Masonry was a very, very important thing as capitalism was being replaced, was overturning feudalism. The capitalists had to get together. It was originally a guild for bricklayers. That's what a mason is. It's a bricklayer. It was originally a guild for bricklayers, but it took on a political character, and it was a way that knowledge was passed on. It was an order, and they were very critical of the Catholic Church. And I believe the Catholic Church has often identified Freemasons as their enemy. Masons do not allow Roman Catholics to join because of the right of confession, is my understanding, that because of the right of confession, a Catholic would be obligated to tell the secrets of the Masonic order. What's interesting is that, the P2 Lodge was actually used. The CIA has used Masonic lodges for CIA operations in the past. The P2 Lodge, for example, in Italy. Read about the P2 Lodge. This was Operation Gladio, which was the USA meddling in Italy's politics and manipulating the politics of Italy to make sure the Communist Party never came to power, was all due to this thing, was all carried out through the P2 Lodge, right? Propaganda Due, or P2, was a Masonic lodge under the Grand Orient of Italy, founded in 1877. And it was this Masonic lodge that was used to manipulate Italy's politics against the Communist Party for many years. The Masons are against communism. Let me just repeat that. Masons are against communism. Like, it's like, that's like they've always been against communism. So, yeah, there is this strand of right-wing thought where it's all a great big conspiracy. It's all a grand conspiracy, right? The Russian Revolution, was a big conspiracy by Wall Street because of the fact that Jacob Schiff got some money to organize the Russian Freedom Group. And there's a certain strand of conspiratorial thinking that argues this. And really what this is, I'll be real with everybody about this for a moment. Let's just talk about this, right? This strand of conspiratorial thinking where the Russian Revolution, they say, was a Wall Street conspiracy. And I don't know, Fidel Castro and who else? And Stalin and Mao were all secretly Freemasons working for the Illuminati and the thing, high up on the thing. This strand of thinking, this is far right thinking, right? This is, the Catholic Church started talking about Masonic conspiracies against it, which, there very well were. Ooh. There very well were anti-Catholic moves taken by Masonry, no question about it. And the Bavarian Illuminati existed in Bavaria in the 1700s. Bavaria was a Catholic country, but there was this group of intellectuals who called themselves the Illuminati, who were moving against the government of Bavaria. But the idea that communism is all a vast diabolical plot by the rich, by the powerful, Illuminati or something like that. This thinking, when you really get down to it, it's fascism and anti-Semitism. And there's no way around that. And I don't like saying that. I really don't like saying that, because that feeds into the breadtube mindset. Breadtube thinks everything is anti-Semitic. They think I'm anti-Semitic because I mentioned rich kids from Williamsburg. And they're like, oh, Williamsburg is a Jewish neighborhood, so Caleb's anti-Semitic. It's like, I wasn't referring to the very impoverished Orthodox Jewish community of Williamsburg. I was referring to the hipsters that are gentrifying. And I said rich kids, not impoverished Orthodox Jews. Like, and it's like everything's anti-Semitism nowadays. Everything's fascism. But honestly, that whole, the Russian Revolution was a big conspiracy by the Freemasons and the Illuminati and Wall Street. That is anti-Semitism. That's what that is. I there's no other way to put it, right? And it's based on bullshit. The Jacob Schiff claim, the idea that Jacob Schiff, funded the Russian Revolution. I've debunked that a million times. He didn't fund the Russian Revolution. He funded an anti-Tsar group, but he was anti-Bolshevik also. And Jacob Schiff immediately started trying to move all the Jews out of Russia after the fall of the Tsar. He started trying to get them to leave the country. Zionism was very anti-communist, right? Communists and Zionists hated each other, and they said so, right? Theodore Herzl said that Marxism was the greatest threat to the Jewish people because it threatened to take away their national identity. And, until the Second World War, the Zionism didn't have a majority among the Jewish community. It was most of the Jewish community were Marxists or leftists. And it wasn't until the Second World War and the horrors of the Holocaust and the death of millions of Jews in the Holocaust that you even got a Zionist majority among Jews around the world. So the whole narrative there, that it's just, there's so many layers of bullshit there. So many layers of bullshit, right? And it's like, okay, so if he's a Freemason, I mean, Masonry historically tends to be Christian. Now, Jews are allowed to become Freemasons. They're allowed to be Masons now, but historically they weren't allowed to be. Historically, you had to be a Christian Protestant to be a Freemason, right? Masonry is largely a British movement. I mean, there's French Masonry, and then there's English Masonry and Scottish Masonry. But historically, it's largely a British movement. It's how, like, kind of the liberal Protestant ideas of the British bourgeoisie were disseminated at a time when that was something that one could not do, right? And people talk about Masonry being pro-Israel and stuff, and that they do have like certain loyal. They do support Jerusalem. I understand Masons believe that they're descended from the Temple of King Solomon or something like that, and but a lot of the stuff, a lot of that conspiracy narrative, I mean, it's just bullshit, right? I mean, the Illuminati was discovered in Bavaria. A lot of the people who put it on, who were involved in it, were executed. And the bourgeoisie, when they were organizing to overthrow feudalism, they couldn't do so publicly, because if you spoke against feudalism publicly, you got burned at the stake. So they had to organize secretly. And, it's kind of like the alchemical tradition, right? Alchemy, right? You couldn't be going around talking about science and chemistry back in the day, or else you got burned at the stake. And so they formed the alchemical order, the secret orders, where they would pass on knowledge about the elements and mixing things together, etc. Alchemy was a secret order, because you couldn't go around talking about chemistry back in the feudal times, so you'd be burned at the stake. And that as capitalism was coming out of feudalism, there was a lot of secret organizing, and there's also an element of corruption in all of this. And that's, there's the bourgeoisie are very nepotistic. It's all about who you know, right? And they help out their buddies, right? If you're friends with somebody, they help you get a job. And if you're not friends, and these kind of fraternal orders are a place people help each other, a lot of salesmen used to become Freemasons, because if you're at a business and you have to buy from somebody and the other guy's got a Masonic ring on, you're supposed to give him priority, right? And in the business community, being a part of a lodge, I remember I used to have this conversation with my parents or my grandparents, my grandparents, I remember them telling me that back before television was invented, that Tuesday night card game was really important. When there was no TV, who you played cards with on Tuesday night was a really big deal, because if not, there's no TV to watch. And before television was invented, in small towns, people joined a lodge, right? You joined the Masons, you joined the Elks, the Moose, the Odd Fellows. If you were Catholic, you could join the Knights of Columbus. It was just, you joined a lodge. That's what most people did, is they joined a lodge. The communists even had their own lodge. It was called the International Workers' Order, the IWO. They had their own lodge. The communists did, and the Socialist Party had their own lodge called the Workmen's Circle. So it's like lodges were a big part of U.S. culture before TV was invented. And it's still around. They got the Loyal Order of the Moose and the Odd Fellows Club, and these groups still exist. And they were just part of small town culture. It was part of society. Was you joined a lodge. The other thing is, there was no unemployment insurance back then. There was no unemployment insurance back then. There was no health insurance back then. And part of the reason you joined a lodge was you paid into the lodge, and then if you lost your job, your brothers would help you. You know, they'd bail you out if you were going to lose your house or something like that. It was they called it social insurance is what it was called. So, you know, Masonry was a lodge. It was a lodge, but it was also a lodge that disseminated. It was kind of like the Boy Scouts. It still is kind of like the Boy Scouts. You take certain classes, they pass on certain knowledge to you, certain wisdom, and then you like move up a rank, right? And that's what they are. I mean, and it's just, you know, it was a thing that older folks did and still do. I mean, it's still around, right? There's Masonic temples everywhere, buildings, and, you know, but the people who want to make it out into something it's not. I mean, do groups like this serve purposes for the American intelligence? Well, I just linked you the P2 Lodge, right? But they were working against communism. Communism wasn't a vast conspiracy of Masons. Masons were working for the CIA against communism, right? And historically, these organizations play a very, you know, they tend to be very pro-U.S. establishment, very pro-CIA, et cetera. A lot of them are just social clubs, you know. So, you know, you're kind of missing the point there. I don't know. That whole, you know, Bolsheviks were a Freemason conspiracy by the Illuminati and the thing high up on the thing. Whenever you read somebody saying that, if you dig deep enough, it gets to be anti-Semitic pretty soon. I'm just being honest with you. That conspiracy narrative, first of all, it leads, there's no hope because everything's part of the secret conspiracy. Everything's part of the secret cabal. Everything's part of the conspiracy, number one. And number two, if you really dig deeper, pretty soon it turns into the Jews, right? It turns into anti-Semitism. And I don't like being the guy to say that because there's so many bullshit artists who use that to dismiss any criticism of anything. But it's true, though, that the conspiratorial narrative, well, the problem isn't capitalism. The problem isn't economics. The problem, no, it's all just the secret Freemasonic Lodge, Illuminati. The more you dig into that stuff, the more it leads to hopelessness because everyone's part of the great conspiracy. And number two, the more it leads to, you know, you dig a little deeper and it gets to be some anti-Semitism there. I'm just being honest with you. And I've been reading that kind of literature for years. And there are conspiracies that go on. I mean, I don't think a lone gunman killed JFK. You know, I don't think that I mean, I look at the killing of, you know, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan and, you know, and John Hinckley and all that was going on there. I don't think that's as it seems. I've got questions about 9/11. It's fine. It's fine to think that there are conspiracies. There are conspiracies within the ruling class, absolutely. But the conspiracy narrative that obscures any discussion of economics. They do not want to talk about economics. Right? There's no problems with capitalism. Everything's just controlled. And it's all just about this secret shady group that wants to control. It seems to already control everything. That's not a good place to go. Right? Because there are divisions among the ruling elite. And also, there's not often the rich and powerful, there are different agendas among them. They're competing with each other. They're struggling against each other. And those divisions in the ruling class create openings for us. So that's my response to that. I hope I wasn't too harsh there, but there are divisions in the ruling class. And it's, you know, Stalin would never have been allowed to be a Freemason because he was an atheist. And the same for Marx and the same for Mao. All right. For all of Vietnam's successes, why are they plagued with sex trafficking? Well, I would assume that that's related to tourism, right? You know, I know Cuba has had issues with that as well. And that, you know, where you have tourists from around the world going to resorts and things like that, that's where you tend to have those problems with human trafficking and all of that. And I assume, I don't know what your source is about that in Vietnam. I'd like to see some statistics and data because, I mean, human trafficking is a big problem across Eastern Europe. It's a big problem in Asia, all of Asia, many parts of Asia. I'd be curious to see what your data is on that in Vietnam in particular. But that said, I think that if they do have that problem, that would be related to tourism. It's probably more related to tourism than anything else, right? You know, you can read about sex. They call it sex tourism. That's a big thing. And actually, U.S. military bases tend to be very closely tied in with that. Read about U.S. military bases and sex trafficking. Google it and read about it. You know, Vietnam doesn't have any military bases for the United States, but it's an awful problem. So there you go. Next question. Accomplishments of Hugo Chavez. Well, Hugo Chavez came to power. There were only 12 public universities in Venezuela. Today, there are 32 public universities in Venezuela. When Hugo Chavez came to power, there was widespread illiteracy in Venezuela. Now, the United Nations acknowledges that illiteracy has been wiped out in Venezuela. Vast expansion of access to healthcare, the Cuban Doctors Program. Many people got their sight because of Hugo Chavez. There are many people in Venezuela that were poor because of their housing or because of their poverty, that were poor and lost their eyesight due to conditions related to poverty. And they brought eye surgeons from Cuba to North Korea, or from Cuba to Venezuela. And there were millions of people who got their eyesight thanks to Hugo Chavez. He made people see because he brought Cuban doctors. Do the numbers. I mean, living conditions in Venezuela have vastly expanded because of the socialism of Hugo Chavez. I mean, the amount of universities he built, the wiping out of illiteracy, the construction projects. Hugo Chavez did a lot to raise people up out of poverty, to build a modern country, and to empower people in Venezuela's politics that were historically left out of politics. The impoverished folks up in the mountains, the darker-skinned folks in Venezuela, they were powerless politically until Chavez came along, and he empowered them. He used the state-owned oil company to build up their resources. Bolivarian socialism. They built an anti-monopoly coalition, a united front. When Chavez first got elected in 1998, he didn't say he was against communism. He said he was for neither capitalism or socialism. He was for the third way, whatever was best for Venezuela. He was a Bonapartist when he first took power. And then they tried to remove him in a coup. And then, as a result of that, he realized that it was the labor unions, the working class, the rank and file soldiers who had his back. So he started moving leftward. It wasn't until 2003 that Hugo Chavez announced that he was a Marxist and that he was moving Venezuela toward 21st century socialism. So that's really important, right? That it was an anti-monopoly coalition. It was a united front. The Communist Party endorsed him. He appointed one member of the Communist Party, only one member of the Communist Party, to his cabinet when he first got elected. And one thing he brags about is Hugo Chavez was in the military. And he talked about when he was a military guy in his younger days, you know what one of his jobs was? To hunt communists. To hunt communists. Did you know this? Hugo Chavez was in his 20s. He was the leader of a military division, and they would send him around the countryside hunting for communists because there was a communist insurgency, a communist armed uprising going on. He hunted for communists. And he said, there are people that I was hunting for back in my 20s who I've appointed to government positions. Things change. Venezuela is a great case study in why we need to have political innovation. Hugo Chavez, when he first took office, was against communism, and he was for whatever was good for Venezuela. He only appointed one single member. He had a history as this military guy who was oppressing communists, but he was the leader of a united front. And then he took office. And then, as he took office, the ruling class of the United States and their allies, the comprador bourgeoisie, moved against him, and he was forced to empower the workers, and one thing led to another. And this is how socialism works, right? And that these people that want to just be purists, they would have said, oh my God, you're a revisionist for voting for Hugo Chavez. He's against communism. He even killed communists. He hunted for communists when he was young. You don't get it. Real politics is about making real alliances, divisions, and strategy, and coalitions, and united fronts. Venezuela is a great example, the way the communists took power, and they changed their tactics. That's the other thing. In the 70s and 80s, the communists in Venezuela, what did they do? They were up in the mountains waging guerrilla warfare because Venezuela was an authoritarian military state, and you couldn't organize in the cities. And so the communists were waging guerrilla warfare in the countryside. But then, as Venezuela opened up as a result of the U.S. imperialists, moving toward neoliberal economics and away from the military juntas and dictatorships, the open society of George Soros, that gave the communists the opportunity to go into the cities again and organize united fronts. They changed their tactics, right? The situation changed in 24 hours, so the tactics must also change in 24 hours. That's important to understand as well. And if the communists in Venezuela just said, no, you have to wage guerrilla war in the countryside, nothing would have changed. And we never would have gotten socialism in Venezuela. But that when the conditions changed in the 90s, the communists of Venezuela changed their tactics, and they started organizing in the cities, and they built a united front with Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez got elected, and then he was attacked by the U.S. imperialists, and that forced him to become closer to the communists. And one thing led to another, and this is how socialist revolutions develop. And you need to study that history. And in the new book, I have a whole section on the Bolivarian coalitions. Right? When you talk about building an anti-monopoly coalition, Hugo Chavez is a great example of that. It's a great example of that. Right? The kind of activity, the kind of political innovation we need. That's what Hugo Chavez did. He found a way. He was the leader of a coalition that eventually started, created a socialist society in Venezuela. So there you go. 21st century socialism. What was Holodomor, and was it a myth? Well, there really was a famine. I mean, that question, the way it's framed there, is a little bit odd, because there really was a famine. There was clearly a famine in the USSR in 1931, 32. There were crop failures. People starved to death. There's nothing about that. Nothing wrong. I mean, that's factual. But did it happen because Stalin was sitting up there in the Kremlin going, I hate Ukraine. How can I starve and kill Ukrainians because I hate Ukraine? Or did it happen because the Soviet Union did not have a modern agricultural system, and because of the fact they were surrounded and barricaded, and they had a policy of peasant enrich yourself, enriching the poor peasants, and after that policy was not successful, they then shifted very rapidly to building collective farms. And it was a nightmare when they first implemented it. It was a disaster. But then after a couple of years, the collective farm system that they set up was very successful. And they had, for the first time in their history, a modern agricultural system. Until Stalin came along, the USSR didn't even have tractors in their fields. I mean, it was Stalin who built the modern agricultural system of Russia. So it's like these people who are like, oh, communism always fails. Look, there was a famine. It's like there was a famine all the time under the Tsar. Before the Russian Revolution, they had malnutrition-related deaths all the time. And it was Stalin and the communists who cured all that starvation. But somehow, they're like missing the point. And this is the selective interpretation of history, right? It was Stalin who electrified the USSR. It was Stalin who wiped out illiteracy in the USSR. It was Stalin who, raised the life expectancy astronomically. I mean, it's like the achievements of the Soviet Union in rapidly industrializing, building a modern agricultural system, building a modern steel industry and modern power plants. And it's like the massive rise in living conditions that the Soviet Union presided over, the explosion of economic growth that happened in the 1930s under the 5-year plans. It's like, and people are like, nope, there was this famine, so none of that counts for anything. It's just like, it's such an obvious bullshit way of talking about it. So there you go. There you go. Do you know anything about Ghassan Kanafani? I don't, but I'll Google it now. Since the person super chatted, I might Google it. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but I'm Googling it. Who is Ghassan Kanafani? Ghassan Kanafani. Ghassan Kanafani, the life of a Palestinian writer and author, leading member of the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine until he was assassinated by the Mossad. Very interesting. I don't know my Palestinian Marxists very well. I know about George Habash, and I know about Layla Khalid, but I did not know about Ghassan Kanafani. So now I know about him. I'll have to read up on him. Very interesting. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, that still is around. It's the Marxist-Leninist Palestinian Resistance Organization, the PFLP. That's the ML, that's the hardline ML organization. So there you go, among the Palestinians, right? So there you go. Why Are Flowers So Red? Song about love and revolution in China. Not familiar with that song, but I'll Google it since the person sent it to me. Why are flowers so red? Song, love, revolution. I'm not familiar with this song. Why Are Flowers So Red? Was originally an interlude played in a popular 1960s spy movie, Visitors on Icy Mountain. Oh, I know about Visitors on Icy Mountain. That's a classic. That's a classic Chinese communist movie about spies and stuff. I've seen that on YouTube. It's from the Mao era, Visitors on Icy Mountain. there you go. Okay, well, there you go. I didn't know the song, but now I learned something. You learn something every day, right? There you go. I learned about the song. All right, next question. Who killed Stalin 70 years ago this week? Well, I mean, Lori, I know what you're getting at there, and I've heard this theory many times that somehow Stalin was assassinated. But Stalin was very old, and I mean, it's widely understood that he died of natural causes. There are some people who speculate otherwise, but it's mere speculation. I have no basis for thinking that is factual. So I don't know. I mean, it looks to me like he died of natural causes, but there are people who ask other questions about the guards and was he poisoned, or I have no basis for believing any of that, but I know it is widely believed among hardline pro-Stalin people, anti-revisionist kind of people. There is a belief that Stalin was assassinated, that maybe the allies of Khrushchev moved against him. I don't have a reason for believing that, but I know that is widely believed. And that I guess his son thinks that was the case, and that a couple years after Stalin's death, 56, you had a very dramatic shift. I mean, Khrushchev very much wanted to bury Stalin's, historical legacy. And one thing that the Chinese Communist Party has pointed out is that that what Khrushchev did to Stalin in the 1956 secret speech, that doomed the Soviet Union. I mean, to tell the global communist movement that the man they had defended all these years was just as bad as the bourgeoisie was saying, that was such a devastating ideological blow. That crushed many of the communist parties of the world. That hurt the communist movement like you wouldn't believe. And that's why the Khrushchev secret speech, the 1956 secret speech, that was a devastating blow that really damaged the global communist movement. And it wasn't true. I mean, Khrushchev's secret speech was full of bullshit. One of the claims in Khrushchev's secret speech is that Stalin was so scared when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. He was just so scared. He was like hiding under his desk crying and was like, that's such bullshit. That's such bullshit. Stalin was a bank robber at one point. Did you know that? Stalin would walk into banks with a gun and rob people. So you think Stalin is afraid of an army that's thousands of miles away? Give me a break. Give me a break. Right? But what Khrushchev was saying was he was saying to the U.S. imperialists that Stalin wasn't a good ally during World War II. And that speech is never, Lori's reading Grover Furr, and that Grover Furr digs into that speech, and he digs into all these claims made by Khrushchev, and he gets into the other side of the story and says, well, actually, this person was accused of this, and that's Grover Furr. My favorite book by Grover Furr is Blood Lies, and it is his refutation, point by point, of Timothy Snyder of Yale and his book Bloodlands. That is a great book. I recommend Blood Lies because Grover rips Timothy Snyder to shreds in that book. If you're going to read a Grover Furr book, especially in the context of Ukraine and everything Timothy Snyder is saying about Putin and all that, go read Blood Lies by Grover Furr. That is by far his best work, in my opinion. I've read all the Grover Furr stuff, most of it. My criticism of it is it gets a little bit too much into the minutia, right? I mean, about who actually killed Sergei Kirov and did Trotsky meet with this person in the hotel and all of that. But go read Blood Lies. Read Blood Lies. That is really important. And it shows you that Timothy Snyder is just a flim-flam man. I mean, he's a flim-flam man. He's not a real historian. I mean, the fact this guy's the head of Russian studies at Yale, he's a fraud, right? Got wall of Czechoslovakia, died a week after Stalin. Other of Stalin's allies were removed from power or died not long after Stalin died. Well, okay. I mean, convince me. I'm open to it. I'm not saying there's nothing there, but I have not yet seen anything to like fully smoking gun convince me, but I'm open to it. I mean, the fact that Enver Hoxha believes it, the fact that Stalin's son believes it, that's starting to, I'm open to it. I'm not thoroughly convinced. I'm open to it. But, with all things, you want to be careful of getting too far into the rabbit hole. That's one thing I want to warn people about, I love Grover Furr and his work. I've hung out with Grover Furr. I've been out to New Jersey and had dinner with him a number of times. He was at the wedding of a couple good friends of mine who moved to China. And, I like Grover a lot. He's a really good man. He's got grandkids and he's a really good man. Grover is an amazing guy. But one thing, and this isn't even really related to Grover, but it's one thing. Well, this is interesting. You're saying Beria killed Stalin. It's funny because Grover defends Beria. A lot of the people who think Stalin was assassinated think Beria was also assassinated because Khrushchev also went after Beria and sent out the memo that Beria was a pedophile or whatever. So that's interesting. You're blaming it on Beria when a lot of the people who defend Stalin also defend Beria. But anyway, I just warn people, don't get too far down the rabbit hole because you want to be able to talk. You always want to be able to talk to somebody who doesn't know any of this stuff. You always want to be able to talk to someone who's never met a communist before, and you want to be able to explain it all to them. You want to be able to sit down with someone who's never met a communist or a socialist and can't understand why anyone would be such a thing. You want to be able to sit there and say, well, actually, it would be good for the banks, factories, and industries to be organized to serve public good and not profits. And the Soviet Union had a lot of great achievements, and China's leading the world in terms of great achievement. You want to be able to sit down and just have those kind of conversations with people. And if you get too far into this stuff, I'm just telling you, I'm being honest with you all. If you get too far into this stuff, your ability to talk to normal people suffers. And that may not be what you want to hear. And maybe it doesn't matter, right? Maybe for you, this is just, if it's just kind of entertainment, you want to go down this rabbit hole, go down it. But if your goal is to make yourself an effective activist and win people to socialism, you don't want to get too caught up in who really killed Sergei Kirov and was Stalin assassinated. And you don't want to get too caught up in that stuff because it will limit your ability to engage with people, average normal people who could be won over. I'm just telling you. So that's my advice, but it's up to you. Everyone has their own interests, and I'm fascinated by Soviet history and by all kinds of world history. And, there you go. And we got to defend the legacy of the Soviet Union. I mean, the lies they say are socialism never accomplished anything. It failed everywhere. It's like, that's so obviously bullshit. That's why I became so dedicated to communism. Is because I'd been told my whole life that communism had never worked anywhere. And everybody knew this. It was just a fact. Communism has never worked anywhere. And so I just started reading and I was like, wait, this isn't true. Basic economic data shows this is bullshit. And at that point, that's how I realized, okay, we've been lied to. We've been sold a bill of goods because this is bullshit. And it's just people repeat this without thinking about it. And it's so obviously false. The claim that communism has never accomplished anything, never achieved anything. American politics is largely predicated on that assumption. And it's so far from the truth. So far from the truth. I mean, it's like the massive achievements of the Soviet Union, raising millions of people up out of poverty, electrifying a whole country, wiping out illiteracy. They invented their own computer system. They invented LED lights. They patented the first cell phone. They built the world's largest hydroelectrical power plants. They invented space travel. I mean, it's like the achievements of socialism are so massive. I mean, so many countries around the world were industrialized by the Soviet Union. They electrified Egypt. They electrified Syria. I mean, it's like you could start listing all the achievements of communists and industrialization. It's like that lie. Oh, well, we can't have free healthcare because if we do, look at the Soviet Union. Everyone starved to death and died. Communism just never worked. That's such bullshit. There's no factual basis for that whatsoever. Communism had problems. Communism had shortcomings. Communism needed to adjust. China, the market sector, but the communism failed stuff. That is just so bullshit. It is so wrong on so many levels. I mean, there's just no, you can't, like some things are true and some things are not. That is just not true. It's just not true. And that's what got me so into communism, is because the conversation around communism is predicated on such an obvious lie. And then what drives me crazy is that people who call themselves communists now are chicken shit, and they repeat this. They won't even stand up against this. And that's like beyond me. All these people walking around who call themselves socialists, they agree with that. And I really can't comprehend that. And that drives me even more crazy. It's like, we can talk about the problems of the Soviet Union and all that, but we can recognize the Soviet Union's not here and that their model is not coming back. Obviously, there's going to be new forms of socialism, but you can't say the Soviet Union never accomplished anything. You can't say that it produced nothing but gulags. The stuff that we've been spoon-fed our whole lives is just pure bullshit. So we got to stand up against it. And if they have the ability to lie like this, there you go. All right, folks. It's just after midnight here in Brooklyn, and it's been a fun stream. Streams are interesting. Sometimes I come on here with a real definite plan. Other times I just open by just kind of telling you what's on my mind. And yeah, I'm going to get the clip from Kim Iverson up as soon as possible. I will say, if you haven't registered for the conference yet, let me just end by saying this. If you haven't registered for the conference yet, we need you to register, because we need to know how many people are going to be there so we can put on the most effective conference we can put on. But you want to be at the Summit Against Hypocrisy. We need you there. We really need you to come to the Summit Against Hypocrisy. It's very important. It's extremely important that we have you there. It's extremely important that we have you at this conference. And if you can't come, just donate, right? If you want to register to attend, I'm sending you the registration link right now. I'm dropping the registration link in the chat. So register. We need you there. We need you at the Summit Against Hypocrisy, a great anti-imperialist conference that's coming up in Washington, D.C. It's going to be great. We need you there. We need you there. We need you at the Summit Against Hypocrisy. It's going to be a great conference. So here's the link. Here's the link. But if you can't make it, if you're not able to make it, we've got a way you can just send us a nice donation. Shout out to Elizabeth, the president of CPI. No one is working harder than her. She is working so hard to keep everything going and keep the finances in order and all of that. And, we're already way over budget and we're scrambling to figure out how we're going to do the conference. So please, if you can't make it, just send us a nice donation. Send a donation. It goes straight to CPI. Donate. It's a Stripe link. Just send a donation to help us do the Summit Against Hypocrisy. It's going to be a great event. It's going to be great. Elizabeth is working really, really hard, but other people are working really hard too. There's going to be some great speeches, some great music, great guests. It's going to be a great event. You get a free copy of the new book. It's going to be awesome. We need you there. It's taking place in Washington, D.C. So if you can't make it, by all means, just send us a nice donation. That would help. That would really help take the weight off of our shoulders and make it go much more smoothly. We're figuring out all the different people, all the different speakers and everything. It's going to be an exciting event. I'm very happy about it. And we're moving ahead. But go and register if you haven't registered. Give us a donation if you can't make it. It's going to be great. There you go. There you go. And I think on that note, I'm going to pull up the closing music and we'll be on our way. So thanks, everybody. Catch you on the next stream. Hopefully that's soon, maybe even tomorrow. Talk to you soon. Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.